House will come back to order. House will come back to order. Clerk will ring the bell. What you got? Clerk will read the caption to a group of privilege resolutions.
Honoring the life and memory of Sergeant Danny Norris in retiring badge number 902. Honoring the life and memory of Anthony DeNorris Trammell Sr. Honoring the life and memory of Mary Jane Salter. Recognizing and commending Representative Edward Mickey Stevens upon the grand occasion of his retirement. Recognizing and commending Patricia Gant. Recognizing and commending Jamal Rucker. Recognizing Albert Thomas Reeves. Recognizing Charlie Thomas Garton. Recognizing and commending Howard Chief Ellis Jr. Recognizing May 15, 2021 as Henry County Bicentennial Celebration Day. Honoring Dr. William Gay for his contributions to Black radio. Congratulating and commending Blue Ridge Adventure Wear. Recognizing and commending the Fannin County women's basketball team. Recognizing and commending Alan Bradford. Congratulating and commending Judge Sarah Doyle. Congratulating Horace King for his trailblazing Georgia Bulldogs football career and for being an outstanding Athenian. Honoring the University Cancer and Blood Center, Athens Clark County Medical Oncology Clinic for outstanding public service. Commending and congratulating Verna May Dabney. Honoring the life and memory of Caden Lee Musgrove. Congratulating the Georgia Southern's Clay Target team for winning the 2021 Division IV ACUI Collegiate Clay Target National Championship. Commending Mike Glenn upon the retirement from the Glader Atlanta Christian School. And for other purposes, that completes the reading of the privilege resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 115.
Senate Bill 115 by Senator Robertson the 29th, Albers the 56th, Harper the 7th, Payne the 54th, and Cowser the 46th. To be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia Ontario relating the general provisions regarding driver's licenses so as to provide for an instructional course or presentation educating drivers and the public on best practices to implement when interacting with law enforcement officers. This bill having referred to the Committee on Motor Vehicles. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Momdahan to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise today to start a conversation, to offer a solution, and to take a first step to resolve this issue of law enforcement interaction. To recognize the initial steps to a real resolution to these issues starts with a proper education in law enforcement interaction. That's right. It starts with education, as do many things in our communities and our society. It's understanding the underlying motives and facts and the things that affect us every single day. I rise today because on March 9th of 2018, at 1 a.m. in the morning, a young lady was driving home after a night out in Cobb County. She was pulled over. Now this young lady, she was panicked, as many of us who are sitting right here in this chamber. She looks around. She sees the blue lights flashing in the rearview mirror. As a man approaches her vehicle and asks her for her information, it becomes more and more evident that this was not a law enforcement officer, but instead a sexual predator and a police impersonator. This young lady was sexually assaulted, and the perpetrator left the scene in a hurry. 4 short hours later, he then went on to sexually assault another female driver, yet again impersonating a law enforcement officer. Let me tell you, I think there's been a lot of talk on what this bill does and what it doesn't do. Let me start by saying this. Senate Bill 115 on line 14 requests that the Department of Public Safety work in collaboration with our friends at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center to develop a curriculum to educate drivers on the best practices to implement when interacting with law enforcement, and to roll this curriculum into all driver education programs that already exist under the law today. It dictates that it should teach new drivers to understand what they should do if they start to be pulled over by a police officer. It would teach our young women and men to pull over in a well-lit and populated area, a nice, brightly lit gas station, where it's safe, where they can identify folks, and that if they are not certain to call 911, to ensure that the person that's pulling them over is a real law enforcement officer and not a potential predator. It will teach our drivers common sense principles, like when you get pulled over, turn on your dome light, roll down your window, put your hands on the wheel, and lower the temperature when an officer comes up to your car. Senate Bill 115 will educate our drivers on why officers ask the question they ask. And we have to remember that these are children. These are children that don't understand how to parallel park or what a yellow line means in a roadway. They're looking for simple explanations on what they need to do. It's going to express the danger and the challenges that our friends in the law enforcement community take every single day when they interact with our communities. And we'll reinforce the fact that every traffic stop is different. Senate Bill 115 goes further. And I think this is the balancing point. This is what we have to remember when we educate our young people. This bill recognizes the fact that we have to develop expectations for officer conduct. That's right. That these students have to know, hey, what do you need to expect when this officer pulls up to your window and talks to you? And it's going to empower Georgians with the knowledge to protect their constitutional rights during a traffic stop. That includes the freedom of speech, searches and seizures, and self-incrimination, as well as a clear understanding of how to report unprofessional, unsafe behaviors exhibited by those law enforcement professionals. Senate Bill 115 goes forward to also help our friends in law enforcement in our counties to protect our school zones, and that was a measure that overwhelmingly passed this House earlier this year. But make no mistake, the sole purpose of Senate Bill 115 is to protect our families, our citizens, and our officers through education. To teach them what those expectations should be. As a father of 3 children and 2 daughters, I would simply ask that you pass this step forward in the right direction to put our families, our communities, and their safety first. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the way if there's no questions.
You do have a lot of questions.
I'll take a couple, Mr. Speaker. I yield for a couple.
Chair recognizes Representative Walensky in room 341 for a question.
Thank you, Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that Section 2 of this bill was originally filed by me? The answer is yes.
The answer is yes, sir. That's House Bill 248, I believe.
Does the gentleman yield again?
I do.
Is it not true that every relationship is a two-way relationship, and we got to make sure that when one side is trained in communications, that both sides are trained in acting properly, and that benefits and makes it safe for everybody in Georgia?
That's right. Education is the key to this cooperation. I appreciate the question.
Do you further yield?
I'll take one more, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Knight to your right for a question.
The gentleman in the end of well, do you yield?
Yes, sir. I yield.
Is there anything special about today other than sine die?
Well, if you have to ask, today is my birthday.
All right. Happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We've got a number of members that have signed up to speak. Chair recognizes Representative Alexander to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The death of George Floyd at the hands of police last year was a wake-up call for many Americans about the multitude of problems inherited in our modern-day policing system. But it was deja vu for Black Americans. Mr. Floyd's murder was also a reminder that past efforts to address problems with policing have failed repeatedly. It is against the backdrop of these realities, including the backdrop of the start of the trial of the police officer who murdered Mr. Floyd, that I am deeply troubled by the provisions in Senate Bill 115. If public safety is the goal, then this body must not pass Senate Bill 115. Senate Bill 115 may seem innocuous on this face, but when you really dig deep down into the bill, it is the real world implementation. The problems with Senate Bill 115 are glaring. It creates a new instructional course designed to educate drivers on how to behave when interacting with law enforcement officers. The bill emphasizes on the behavior of drivers and the onus it places on ordinary civilians of Georgia to protect their own safety. Shifts responsibility away from where it should lie, which is with the police. Another incredibly troubling provision of this bill is the fact that the training course would be designed by and possibly given by law enforcement officers. There is a long-standing adversarial relationship between police and the communities they serve, especially communities of color. And a training course for civilians being designed and potentially administered by the very people who have contributed to the brokenness of the police system would do nothing to address the lack of trust between police and people of color. Senate Bill 115 would do nothing to fix our nation's broken system of policing. Instead, Senate Bill 115 will likely contribute to the problems in our current system of policing. One thing this bill fails to address is the importance of ensuring that drivers and civilians are aware of their rights when they are stopped by police. And yes, I did try to get that amended when I was in the committee, and it failed. The training course established in Senate Bill 115 requires civilians to learn about the rights of officers, but it does not require civilians to know their own rights in interactions with police. This is horribly one-sided, out of touch with reality, and incredibly dangerous. When civilians do not know their own rights, it is more likely that their rights will be violated, as we as a legislative body should be strongly against such a thing. Instead, us as a legislative body should support measures that ensure civilians are fully abreast of their rights, especially when they are interacting with police. One of the most important rights of civilians when they are interacting with police to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is supposed to protect civilians from these encroachments, but law enforcement officers frequently disregard the protection of others. For example, once an individual exercises their right to remain silent, officers will often ignore this and continue peppering them with questions. Officers will conduct searches of cars in violation of people's rights. Eventually, evidence procured this way might be thrown out in court, but the damage to the civilian, or at the outset, the victim of police overreach remains. The expectation should not be that civilians take courses on the rights of police officers. It should be exactly the opposite, because when civilians do not know their rights, they cannot protect themselves. They cannot easily advocate for themselves, and thus, it is more likely that their rights will be violated. Finally, a diverse coalition of over 35 social justice organizations have all voiced their opposition to Senate Bill 115 because of the very reasons I have stated, and I urge this body to heed the concerns of these organizations. These organizations are subject matter experts on police-civilian interactions, and the best practices for ensuring these interactions do not result in harm done to either the police officer or the civilian. We must fully take into account the concerns of these organizations over the individuals who may stand to benefit financially from the passage of this bill that creates an additional training course for drivers. Along with these organizations, I urge you all to vote no to Senate Bill 115 as currently written, because the government should always be in favor of teaching people their rights and ensuring that those rights are protected. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well and ask that you vote no on this bill.
Chair recognizes Representative Erica Thomas to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Police need accountability, not absolution. We know that the policing system in this country is absolutely broken. And this bill is coming up on the week that Derek Chavin, the man who killed George Floyd after putting his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, starts his trial this week. How is this going to help fix the distrust that divides and exists between communities of color and law enforcement? SB 115 provides instruction for drivers on the best practices for interacting with police. Essentially suggests that someone like Rayshard Brooks was responsible for his own death, not the officer who chased him down and murdered him. This bill fails to inform Georgians of their rights under the Georgia law and the U.S. Constitution when interacting with police. Rather than empower these drivers, this bill simply seeks to absolve law enforcement of their own responsibility. Recently, a Clayton County Sheriff deputy pinned down and beat Roderick Walker, a black man, after a routine traffic stop. This bill makes it seem like the treatment of Roderick received was somehow warranted. Dictating solutions And assigning blame to motorists is not a productive way to engage with our communities that have been on the receiving end of state-sponsored violence for generations. Senate Bill 115 ignores the root of this dangerous law enforcement and civilian interactions. This legislation wrongly places an onus on the civilians to protect themselves from harm when interacting with law enforcement. This legislation wrongly suggests that police violence against the people of color, especially black men, result primarily from bad behavior on the part of the detained and murdered. Instead, the focus should be on addressing racial profiling. I'm going to say that again. The focus should be on addressing racial profiling, the use of excessive force, and other systemic issues that poison the interactions between law enforcement and the civilians. This is an unproductive way to connect with our communities that have a strained relationship with the police. It's dictating rather than finding common solutions to the public safety concerns, especially from communities of color. And today, I urge you to stand against this type of rhetoric and vote no on SB 115. I yield the well.
The chair recognizes Representative Wynn to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think all of us in this body, either as a child or as a parent, know that families are tasked with having the talk at some point in our lives. That talk, the birds and the bees, probably looks a little bit different for all of us. Maybe it's about consent or emotional readiness. Maybe it's about abstinence or disease and pregnancy prevention. But whatever it is, it's a pretty normal part of American family life. But there's another talk that not all of us have to give or hear. That other talk is reserved for Black and brown families, and especially for Black and brown families who have little boys who will soon be teenagers. My friends have shared with me the pain and grief they feel when they have to give that talk. Because what parent wants to tell their child, don't wear a hoodie, don't put your hands inside your pocket, don't run and put your hands up. And still, that might not save you. The reality is, even if citizens do all the right things, it doesn't guarantee that their lives won't be unjustly taken by the hands of law enforcement, especially if you are a Black American. Police violence is the leading cause of death for Black men. And if you are a Black boy or man between the ages of 15 and 34, you are 10 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement than anyone else. But if you are not Black or brown, you can walk into a Black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and kill 9 church members and be taken to Burger King on the way to jail. You can target 3 Asian businesses and kill 8 people, and law enforcement will say, he had a bad day. You can storm the U.S. Capitol with zip ties and Confederate flags, and law enforcement will take your hand and help you walk down the steps of the Capitol. But if you are Black and brown, you can be a 26-year-old emergency room tech sleeping in your bed when law enforcement botches a raid, shoots and kills you in your sleep, and you are still blamed like Breonna Taylor. You can be a 12-year-old boy playing outside in the sandbox with a toy gun when you are shot in the torso and killed by law enforcement like Tamir Rice. You can be a 20-year-old, 120-pound Asian boy holding a pen and shot in the back 3 times by law enforcement. You can be a sitting state representative and knock on the door of the governor's office and get dragged away by law enforcement officers. Instead of passing legislation that requires more training on de-escalation, cultural competency, accountability, and transparency for law enforcement, we are passing legislation that puts the onus on the individual for staying alive. And this legislation does not include the basic fundamental rights of citizens, especially when it comes to search and seizure. This bill sends the wrong message. It perpetuates the myth that civilians are the ones responsible for the way that law enforcement treats them, and it does nothing to address the long-standing distrust between law enforcement and communities of color. Right now, the world is watching the trial of Derek Chavin, the law enforcement officer who put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And during those 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George Floyd begged for his life 27 times. Please, I can't breathe, help. He cries out for his mom 27 times. And yesterday, a 9-year-old little girl had to take the stand, and she testified about the officer. The ambulance had to push him off. They asked him nicely to get off him, and he still stayed on him. He was already dead. There's a saying that we use when we go to protest. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Those are the pleas of Black and brown Americans across this country. And SB 115 doesn't address any of that. We live in 2 Americas. And that is why I'm voting no against this bill. And I do ask you all, we need to seriously reflect on this. Because if you have children and you don't have to give them the talk, you think about telling your 10-year-old little boy, next year when you look like a man, you might get shot and killed for going on a run. That is wrong. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We have a minority report under the rules of the House. 20 minutes for the minority report and then 20 minutes for the chairman's time. Chair recognizes Representative Derek Jackson to speak to the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here strongly opposing Senate Bill 115. You heard the presenter of the bill. He said, quote, teach common sense, unquote. Teach common sense. Let me just share a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, about common sense. I come from a family, nothing but uniforms, military, law enforcement, firefighters. In my family, we did not need someone out of our household to teach us common sense, what to do when you encounter authority. No one. In fact, no Georgian right now is asking for Senate Bill 115. No one is asking us, this body, to teach them common sense, especially when this body continues to use words simply as a bumper sticker for those who say they are patriotic. Spare me, because you watch January 6th, the assault on this country that I serve, and you said nothing. So let me just share 3 words with you today: honor, courage, and commitment. It takes honor, ladies and gentlemen, to do what's right, regardless if it's day or night. Honor. Honor. To make sure that when you see wrong, it is still wrong. It is still wrong. You cannot take a lie and make it the truth. Courage. Always to do the right thing, even when your constituent's not looking. Then commitment. Commitment. Who are you committed to? Who are you committed to? You're definitely not committed to the Word of God that we preach each and every day when we're in this body. To pass a bill that you can't even be a good Samaritan. You're going to charge me in a felony if I give a homeless person within 150 feet of a precinct? I cannot be a good neighbor. So we're going to talk about common sense? We have rules. We have guidelines. For those who say they are about the Constitution, you attack the Constitution every time we pass something that's unconstitutional. Every time. How are you going to pass a bill that goes against protesters? It is their constitution to peacefully assemble. So Senate Bill 115 is talking about teaching citizens about the expectation when they encounter law enforcement. But your demonstration, your behavior is contrary. Contrary. I've watched, and I appreciate the speaker put me in the gallery, because I've watched this body, this machinery, how you twist arms, of your own party, how you talk about taking the rights of a constitutional officer, taking their rights because they did not do your will, to do the wrong, perpetuated by a lie. You talk about cheating and fraud where there's no evidence. It didn't even stand in the court. Republican and Democrat federal judges kicked it out of court. No evidence. Zero. You come before this well in this body and talk about how you talk about patriotism and the Constitution, and you treat it like a bumper sticker. I say to all, strongly oppose Senate Bill 115, honor, courage, and commitment. Honor, courage, and commitment. Because one day you all will have to answer your actions on this earth. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Kennard to speak to the bill or speak to the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in opposition to SB 115. I draw a lot of inspiration, as I'm sure you do, from our 16th President, Abraham Lincoln. One of the things I really admire about President Lincoln is his ability to evolve his thinking and his positions over time. It wasn't until late in his presidency that he actually arrived to the position of being an abolitionist and abolishing slavery. Earlier in his presidency and in his life, he was actually very comfortable with keeping the institution of slavery in the South to preserve the Union. But he started listening. He started being influenced by other voices, other abolitionist voices, namely Frederick Douglass. And over many conversations and with time, he actually convinced President Lincoln that abolishment of chattel slavery was the route that this country needed to take. And then Abraham Lincoln, of course, passed the 13th Amendment, which did end chattel slavery in our country. I too have evolved my thinking across the course of my life. At one time, I used to balk at the idea of white privilege. I didn't think it was a thing. I completely dismissed it. I was like, come on, man, this is America, the land of equal opportunity. And if anyone had enough gumption, grit, self-determination, wanted to do the right thing and work hard enough, you could do anything that you wanted to be in this country, because this is America. Of course, I conceded that there had been some dark days in our national past with slavery, Jim Crow, and the disenfranchisement based on gender, ethnicity, etc. But I also believed that those days were well into our rearview mirror. We had fought a civil war. We had the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education. We had passed the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. We had marched on Washington. We had passed civil rights legislation. We brought women to the table with women's suffrage. We passed the American with Disabilities Act. We elected a black president. And now it's all fixed. We are all on equal footing. And after all, everybody has a struggle. Everybody's had challenges. Even Greg Kennard has felt the sting of discrimination, being raised in an affluent area, but my family did not have a lot of means, and I was raised every day of my childhood in a trailer park. But I fought and clawed my way out of the trailer park with self-determination, and if I did it, anyone can do it. This is America. White privilege is a farce. I look back at that time and my thinking then with embarrassment, shame at my ignorance, my arrogance. I was deep within my own bubble. I actually have many bubbles. Being white is just the first layer of privilege that I possess. Being white, that's currency. But being white and male, that's double the currency. And then when you add to that being heterosexual, being Christian in this Bible Belt culture, being able-bodied, I am swimming in privilege. I can navigate my life very easy with no obstruction because of my identities. But as advantaged as a person born like me is, there are certainly liabilities, largely blindness. Privilege creates significant blind spots as to the experiences of others. As the dominant group, there's really no reason to look beyond your own personal experience. And life is fine for me, and you assume, and privilege assumes, that life is just fine for everybody else. Now, to my credit, as ignorant and as visually impaired as I was, I did begin to listen better. I began to read books on this subject. I did a lot of reading, a lot of listening, not just books that reinforced my own personal paradigm, my own bubble. And after a period of listening, more listening, I began to eventually break out of my bubbles. A greater empathy began to emerge with my heart, and I took steps attempting to walk in somebody else's shoes and look through others' lenses. I began to recognize that everyone does not share my lived experience. Bill Bullard says, opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. It requires no accountability, no understanding. The highest form of knowledge is empathy, for it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. It requires profound purpose larger than the self-kind of understanding. One of the conversations I began to have that expanded my understanding to other experiences was around the conversation of law enforcement, how people engage with the police. For someone like me, for someone like my parents, my grandparents, my wife, my children, all police engagement has been friendly and positive, and our take is the police are the good guys. They're our friends. They are here to serve and protect. Whenever I've seen blue lights flash in my rearview mirror, I've never had any anxiety about that. I just said, oh shoot, how fast was I going? Or maybe I had a tag expired, or maybe there was a brake light, but there's never been a sense of worry, and when the police pull me over, I just simply roll down my window and say, officer, how fast was I going? And I always get a smile, and the worst thing that can ever happen to me is to get a violation, a ticket. But most of the time what happens to me is I get a smile and a friendly, Mr. Kennard, just slow down, be on your way, get your tag updated, and we go from there. But other conversations I began to have with friends of color shed light on a much different experience, a different dynamic with law enforcement. And this has been confirmed hundreds of times now. I've talked to many people of color about their experience. And it began to hit me that people of color have a very different story to tell. And then this story hit me personally when 3 years ago, my daughter married an African-American man, and we became close friends with his family. They've been married 3 years, and my son-in-law is a straight arrow. He's straight, flies right, follows the law as a rule, was a model student. My daughter and Chris met in high school, and he was a model student, a model citizen. He went to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, and now he's an executive officer protecting our coasts. But to hear them talk about the talk that has been mentioned today was just a very foreign experience to me, where there's a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, especially when a young male of color is pulled over. Now, when Chris has his uniform on, he's reasonably safe, but when he puts on civilian clothes and is behind the wheel, there's a whole different phenomenon, a potentially lethal phenomenon called driving while black. SB 115 lacks empathy. It lacks empathy. This is legislation created inside the identity bubble. If you look at all the sponsors and co-sponsors, they're all white, heterosexual, Christian, able-bodied men. When this bill came to motor vehicles, the committee on which I sit, members of color and community advocates of color tried to talk to the group about the different perspectives, tried to make amendments to be inclusive of other citizen experiences. But they were shut down. Their voices were shut down. They were actually met with condescension. They were met with snarky comments, and that smacked of privilege, and I recognize that because I used to be there. I do believe that resources should be poured into training to improve better police engagement with citizens, but such training resources should be directed towards the paid professionals, law enforcement, training on community and race relations, mental health, de-escalation. SB 115 puts the onus on citizens, training citizens to interact with the police. This is a deflection and a misplacement of responsibility. Now, I've been asked before, Greg, you seem to have some animus against white people and an axe to grind against the white community. Do you even like white people, Greg? And I want to set the record straight today. I love white people. My wife is white. My children are white. I love me some white people. But what I don't like is unchecked white privilege and white superiority, the kind that is exclusive and doesn't include other voices and other perspectives. I think in our deliberations and in our decision making, we have to be more open to other voices. SB 115 is one-dimensional, and I'm asking you to vote along with me and vote no. One last thing, there's a spiritual teacher that's important to many of us in this room who said, you can't put new wine into an old wineskin because it will burst. It's too inflexible. It's too brittle. You have to put new wine into a new wineskin, which is soft, flexible, and has the ability to expand. Going forward, I think Georgia needs legislators that operate from a new wineskin. We're going to be better served with new wineskins, new ideas, new paradigms. Mr. Speaker, I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Chairman Corbett for the chairman's time, 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. You know, I rarely come to this well, but today I rise in support of Senate Bill 115. You know, we passed this bill out of the Motor Vehicles Committee last week. When I called this meeting, and some of the members had other meetings to go to, I said, come on, we should be finished. It shouldn't take long. Well, I was wrong. What's a good common sense piece of legislation got turned into a political issue, a political football. I've gotten emails, you know, telling me how this SB 115 discriminates against people of color. You know, I sure hope that the primary author of this bill, who we just mentioned earlier, you know, his wife and kid doesn't find out about this because they are people of color. The author of this bill, you know, it was brought up. They wanted an amendment put on this bill in committee. You know, it got voted down. They wanted to teach the Constitution, but it was mentioned in committee. If they want to bring a bill, if somebody wants to bring a bill to teach the Constitution, better yet, a better idea. Let's make Georgia a Constitution state where we protect all the Constitution. I'm sure we could get a lot of support for that. You know, I was in the 3rd grade. You know, when our school integrated. You know, every day at recess, the white kids and black kids, we would fight at recess. Didn't know why, but we would fight. But you know, after a few weeks, you know, we became friends. And one of my best friends all the way through school, we graduated with, Eddie Richardson. As a matter of fact, we've had him here as Doctor of the Day. My best friend when we graduated high school. He was one of the ones we used to fight with every day. You know, we quit concentrating on what divided us, or what our difference. We started looking at what we had in common. Stuff that united us, and we become best friends. We had a preacher here earlier this year. I think Representative Meeks up in the gallery. I think it was his pastor. You know, his sermon basically said, you know, if you get up every morning looking for something that offends you, guess what? You're going to find it. You will find something that offends you if you get up looking for that. But if you get up looking for stuff that you have in common, look for the good in people, guess what? You're going to find that too. You know, we got to start concentrating, look for what unites us, and quit looking for stuff to make a political issue about. You know, I urge you for favorable consideration for this bill, and I'll yield the rest of my time to Chairman Powell and Representative Montahan. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell for the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. And I've sat back and I've listened to this, and you know, I went to the motor vehicles meeting last week, and I was never as shocked and surprised as I was. I'm pretty well used to, after 30-something years of going to committee meetings, and I've seen certain issues that you could justify when they became hot-button issues. But, you know, I sat there in the meeting and I went there to amend that bill to put this piece on school safety. That's the second part of this bill on here. But, you know, as we got into the meeting, this turned into a full-blown debate over race and over a lot of other issues. And I understand that these are some very tedious times, to say the very least, in where we're living at today. You know, a lot of the cases that have been made and all of this, you know, and I truly can't understand some, but I understand other things when it comes to the process of this House and the legislative process. You need to pick your fights on things. And if there's not a fight in a bill, then don't make something into a bill that doesn't need it. In this bill that you're looking at, the core of this bill, this says that the Department of Training, of Public Safety Training down at JIPSTIC, that they would develop a plan and a program of teaching young adults under the driver training programs in this state certain criteria that could help these young people as they're developing themselves to know how to react if they're stopped. And if you look at the language in here, I mean, it's wide open that it could be anything. They can talk about what law enforcement does when they stop somebody, but they could also teach the young adults how to react, which also would include their rights. It could also include their rights, and I have no doubt that's exactly what it will be done when they develop this plan. You know, at the committee meeting, we kept hearing about, we demand that they talk about constitutional rights. Well, constitutional rights is something that I think everybody knows today. You know, unfortunately, in a lot of cases that some things don't go as well as could be prepared, and I understand, I've said this for years, that law enforcement is a mixed bag a lot of times because of the stress and the strain and the concern that they're under for their lives and for their safety. And I don't always agree that certain law enforcement, some law enforcement do things that are questionable, and generally in this day and time they'll pay the price for that if that's so. But I heard a dialogue, and the dialogue that I've heard up here has been a rehashing of several subject matters this year. I heard an impassioned speech by one of our members that was a baiting type of a speech, but I understand that. I understand politics, folks. But I gave a talk from this well a couple of weeks ago of something that I felt very concerned about, and that's about where we are as a state and as a nation and where we're going. And these things are being cured, and people know what their constitutional rights are. But they also need to understand that as a young driver, when they get a driver's license, what to expect if they're pulled over. And if you look at the language in this, it goes into a lot of things about, you know, it goes into issues such as, you know, continuous citations, habitual violations, understanding an officer's discretion. You know, I remember once upon a time in this nation that when officers stopped you, you automatically had your driver's license in your hand. That was what all of us in my age group was taught. Plus, hopefully, you could ask them if they'd give you a warning instead of a citation. But then over the period of years, as the safety of officers became more and more questionable, then that criteria and a lot of times got out of hand. But one of the things that they do in law enforcement training today is they train dispute resolution. They try to train these officers about how to do things the right and the wrong way. And these are the things that we're moving to. But ladies and gentlemen, well, and I know that I'm not changing the first vote out there, but this bill is not the vehicle to use to talk about your issues unless you're going to continue to make every issue in the legislature something that needs to be drug into this effect. You know, we saw a bill last week, and, you know, I said up front that on the issue of the working on the election system, and I said it. In 2018, the buzzword was suppression. In 2020, it was fraud. So if that didn't tell you anything, there was a problem that we needed to revamp the election system and to fix it so that no matter what county you were from, whether you were from Fulton or Hart or DeKalb or Franklin, no matter where you are, was that the system was the same no matter where you go. But this became an issue, became a terrible issue. And to this day, depending on who you are, we don't know who's telling the truth. We don't know who's read the bill. We don't know the interpretation. Well, that's just like this bill. This bill doesn't say anything that's discriminatory. It only says that the Department of Training Safety down at Gypstick, that they will develop a program to be implemented into the driver training programs to help young adults. And it doesn't say black adults, it doesn't say white adults, it doesn't say Asian adults. It says for all of those who take a driver training course. So this should be a benefit to everybody across all racial lines, all genders. This is a good bill. I understand that this has created a certain amount of anxiety, but this is not the bill that anxiety should have been on. I would encourage everyone in here to vote in favor of this bill. There's two parts to it. One is that it tells the folks that are teaching driver education this is some other criteria that you need to teach these young adults that are taking these courses. The other deals with school safety, of slowing traffic down in school zones. That's what it does, ladies and gentlemen. And I would certainly encourage you to take a good look at this bill. And then if there's other fights to be done, pick the fights on a bill that it really matters to. And with that, I'll yield the will.
Chair recognizes Representative Momtahan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, today we've heard a lot of topics that have nothing to do with this bill. And that's the facts of the matter, folks. We've heard about voting. We've heard about topic after topic after topic. When I was in the committee, the discussion, they wanted to include, as the chairman said, all constitutional rights as part of a driver's education class. I think we were saying the tag words of this year were suppression and fraud. I think the phrase for this week may end up being, did you read the bill? Did you read the bill? All constitutional rights as part of a driver's education class? How does not allowing soldiers use of one home or birthright citizenship have anything to do with making sure that our partners in law enforcement and our citizens are on the same page when they interact? Realistically, what do any of these other topics matter in the context of a driver's education class? A class curriculum. What does it have to do with any of it? The answer to that question, as the chairman made in his remarks, is that these are political charades that have nothing to do with the fact that there are real issues, real ones, that our daughters and our sons, regardless of whether they are black or white, or whether they're Persian, like me. That's right. You know, we talk about these things. The person who stands in the well in front of you today is a person of color. My father went to Georgia State University. He got his PhD at Clark Atlanta University. And for over 20 years, he worked down the street at Grady Memorial Hospital, where he taught Morehouse students social work. Did you read the bill? The answer, I believe, is no. When I was in committee, I asked just simply, hey, what is the bill number that you've put forth with the underlying language that would expand civics education in the state of Georgia? And there was silence in the room. Hijacking bills just to politicize public safety has to stop. Read the bill. You know, we had many comments. We had one that said that this course would be taught by law enforcement. No, that's false. Again, did you read the bill? that this would create an additional driving course? No. Did you read the bill? This just recognizes the fact that we as a community have a responsibility to each other for our mutual safety when it comes to traffic stops and law enforcement interaction. At the end of the day, think about this. Don't oppose a bill that simply allows for educating citizens on how to interact with law enforcement during a traffic stop. Do it for your daughters who don't know that they need to pull into a well-lit area, so that the same events that happened on March 9th to those two women that were sexually assaulted don't happen again. That's all this bill does. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Jasmine Clark rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this bill does not require law enforcement to teach civilians their constitutional rights, and all the attempts to add that specific language were voted down by Republican committee members?
I think the bill speaks for itself, and every member can read the bill. What purpose does Representative Prince rise?
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with House Rule 133, I ask to be exempt from this.
Gentleman has that right, and the journal will so reflect. What purpose does Representative McLeod rise?
Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that some of the Republican members of this House need to walk a mile in a black person's shoes?
What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this bill does not mandate that there be African Americans or people of color on this actual council, so that people can hear from the experiences of people who know how it feels to be discriminated against, to be racially profiled, and to be continuously assaulted by law enforcement? And that is a shame.
I'm sure the lady feels that to be true. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of Senate Bill 115. The ayes are 98, the nays are 72. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes Representative Gunter for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House accept the Senate substitute to House Bill 409 as amended by the House.
Okay, the amendments that will be referenced on the agrees will be on the tables out back of the chamber, out back of the gallery, and out back of room 341. Representative Gunter has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 409 as amended by the House. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 409 by Representative Gunter the 8th and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 15 and Title 45 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to counsel for public officials and agencies, so as to provide for a process for state-funded representation of certain judges in legal actions resulting from performance or non-performance of their official duties.
Chair recognizes Representative Gunter to explain the Senate substitute and the House amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the bill that we passed for the Judicial Legal Defense Fund. This bill creates a commission that's appointed by the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker, and the Council of Superior Court Judges. The amendment that the Senate made was that they put in language by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. This commission doesn't spend any money. All it does is make recommendation to the governor's office. The governor's office completely controls the expenditure of money to, if the recommendation is to represent a judge, that's all the expenditure is. And for that, I'm asking that we go back to the House, and that's what this amendment will do. That was the only change that was made in the Senate. And I'd appreciate your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? It is AM 410547. Any objection? There is objection. Does the gentleman move? Yes. Gentleman moves. All those in favor of adopting the House amendment will vote aye. Those opposed to the adoption will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of the House amendment, the ayes are 132, the nays are 32, and this House has adopted the House amendment. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 409 as amended by the House, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 141, the nays are 28, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 409 as amended by this House. Chair recognizes Representative Scoggins for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 488 as amended by the House.
Representative Scoggins has moved that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 488 as amended by this House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 488 by Representative Scoggins, the 14th and others to be titled an act to amend Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to courts so as to provide for an increase in the minimum compensation for chief magistrates.
Chair recognizes Representative Scoggins to explain the Senate amendment and the House amendment.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this would restore the bill back to its original version. House Bill 488 is a bill that leveled the playing field with the magistrate judges and the other constitutional officers. This bill passed out of the House 154-7, and the amendment, we're just removing a unrelated issue to the magistrate judges.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the amendment has been adopted. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 488 as amended by this House, all those in favor will say aye or vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 163, the nays are 2. And this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 488 as amended by this House. Chair recognizes Representative Vance Smith for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House disagree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 449.
Representative Vance Smith has moved that the House disagree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 449. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 449 by Representative Smith of the 133rd and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 9 of Title 25 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to blasting or excavating near facilities so as revise the Georgia Utility Facility Protection Act.
Chair recognizes Representative Smith to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We sent over a good, clean bill. 16 organizations had gotten together for 6 months to discuss utility code upgrades. They were all in agreement when we sent that bill over. The Senate amended and put an item on that bill that we actually have in a study committee that Chairman Parsons has appointed. The 16 members agreed to study this issue, but yet they put it in the bill. So we're going to disagree and send it back over there to them, Mr. Speaker. If any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
No questions on the gentleman's motion that the House disagree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 449. Is there objection? There is objection. Does the gentleman move? Does the gentleman move? He moves. All those in favor of the motion to disagree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 449 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 165, the nays are 2, and this House has disagreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 449. Chair recognizes Representative Cantrell for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate sub for House Bill 43.
Representative Cantrell moves that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 43. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 43 by Representative Cantrell of the 22nd and others to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 4226, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to form and content of applications for registration, heavy vehicle tax, and satisfactory proof of insurance.
Chair recognizes Representative Cantrell to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, this is a bill that we passed out unanimously about 3 weeks ago, and as much as I hate to admit it, the Senate actually made a couple of very minor improvements to this bill. They actually expanded the definition of the driver of the vehicle so that it wouldn't just be the person applying for the license plate, but it'd be anyone who was expected to drive the car. If you remember, this bill allows a person at their option, if they're going to have some communication challenges, to put that information on their vehicle registration so that a law enforcement officer would be aware of that. In addition, it requires the applicant to sign an affidavit about the condition that they're claiming that an expected driver might have. And those are the only changes to the bill. It actually makes the bill quite a bit stronger, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
You have no questions.
I yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 43, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 166, the nays are 1. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 43. What purpose does Representative Kirby rise? Need to hit your button.
To make a motion?
State your motion.
I move the rules of this House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Bill by President Kirby, the 114th be titled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 47, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to the Georgia legislative retirement system.
On the gentleman's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Chair hears none, and it is so ordered. Retirement. What purpose does Representative Ridley rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
I request that the bill be read for, rules suspended and the bill be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Ridley, the 6th to be titled an act to amend Title 36, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to local government so as to prohibit certain restrictions on long-term rentals.
On the gentleman's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? There is objection. Does the gentleman move? Gentleman moves. All those in favor of the... On the gentleman's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 151, the nays are 21, and the rules of the House have been temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee. It will be assigned to the Judiciary Committee. Chair recognizes Chairman Heath Clark for a motion.
I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to HB 68.
Chairman Clark has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 68. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 68 by Representative Clark of the 147th and others to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 43, 14, 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to certain military certifications that entitle persons to obtain certain professional licenses.
Chair recognizes Chairman Clark to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. House Bill 68 went over to the Senate and came back as Senate Bill 45 with some amendments. And so what Senate Bill or House Bill 68 now does is it's very similar to what we did last year with military spouses and professional license reciprocity. This just establishes it for anybody that moves to our state and establishes residency within our state and they're a legal resident, that the boards will do a licensure by endorsement for them as well if they meet the provisions of being in good standing in the home state. They don't have any kind of, they're not under any kind of examination process. If all the requirements in that state are significantly similar, and if there's any portion of the state exam that requires, or the license that requires a specific state exam, they would have to take that portion of the exam as well. It does carve out dentists and make sure that the medical professions, which are not part of this bill, but it just has some language to reiterate that since they're part of interstate compacts. They did add another section to the bill. Back in 2018, the legislature, we passed some laws for the Georgia Nursing Board to collect some data to understand where the nurses are in the state. They added a provision for the relicensing to make sure that they get that data so that we can know where the workforce needs are, specifically for rural Georgia, to try to help make sure that there's enough nurses in rural Georgia to respond to pandemic situations. So that was a needed for workforce need. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I will yield for any questions.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hawkins to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do, yes, sir.
Is it not true that this bill, House Bill 147, and Senate Bill 45, were not heard in subcommittee or committee in this House?
Well, they were heard in subcommittee. We didn't take a vote in subcommittee. And during that subcommittee, you specifically had some concerns with dentists and gave me and stated in that subcommittee that you would support it if we could remove dentists, make sure that dentists were not part of the bill, and they're not part of the bill.
Does the gentleman yield again?
I will.
No, sir, I did not agree to that. I still have a problem with this bill. 45, Senate Bill 45 was not heard in committee. And on line 41, testing are substantially similar. I don't know anybody that can define substantially similar.
Well, we did that for military spouses last year. There hasn't been a problem with that. I think that you could look through the requirements of a state. I know specifically with you and some of your concerns with dentistry board, even though they're not part of that, that they have some provisions for in their state that you could get a license without passing a state exam. And in our state, you have to pass a state exam, so that would not be substantially similar, and the board would not recognize a state in those kind of situations in other professions because dentists were specifically carved out.
Does the gentleman yield again?
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I'm still against this bill. I think it opens the door to people coming into this state from many other states that are not bringing jobs, they're bringing their own job. This is not a work-building job for Georgia. This is just a move job from other, a moving bill for other folks from other states coming in this state.
Well, we will just disagree, like we've had those conversations before, but we just disagree. There are 250,000 people who move to the state of Georgia annually, and about 25% of those families that move to the state of Georgia, one of the spouses have some kind of professional license. So in order for them to get to this state and get to work and be able to become providers in in this state and not need handouts from the government, but be tax-paying citizens. I think it's very important that we help them be able to hit the ground running and get to work immediately. But Mr. Speaker, I'll yield for any more questions. If there are not any, I'll
You're
ask for a
piling
favor.
up here. I'll let you yield as long as you want to.
I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes Chairman Fleming to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the gentleman in the well, I'm trying to understand what your bill does, and I apologize for not speaking with you before you got there.
Sure.
Because I would have asked you about this. But as I understand it, we sent a bill over to the Senate that, as we have done before, which allowed certain military personnel that come to our state to have certain privileges that help them maybe cut down on the time to get a license to practice professionally somehow. Is that what we sent over there?
No, sir. That's what we did last year, and it passed, and it was signed into law for military spouses.
Well, then tell me, educate me, I'm sorry. What did we send to the Senate?
The same bill we passed earlier today, that was Senate Bill 27. 68 was the same exact bill as 27 that dealt with that 180 days, moving it to 2 years for using training and certification in the military to apply towards professional license once they start to transition out.
So then what we have back from the Senate is nothing like what we sent to them helping out military personnel. Is that correct?
That's correct, but it's still part of the same code section, same title.
So what we have now is not specifically helping the military, but anybody who moves from another state.
That's correct.
They can come into this state, and they no longer have to go through the same application process they did to apply and meet the standards in the state of Georgia?
They would no, sir. They would be given a licensure by endorsement if they meet the criteria that's laid out as far as they've established residency in this state, they're a legal resident of the United States, that they the exam that they've already obtained the license in the other state, as long as those requirements are substantially similar and they're in good standing, not under any kind of investigation in that home state. But if there is a portion of their exam to get the license in Georgia that is a state-specific exam dealing with the states and dealing with our laws, that they would have to take that part of the exam too. But these are people who have already obtained a license in another state that are substantially similar in scope and practice to get that license. They move to our state to allow them to get to work when they get here.
Would the gentleman feel more comfortable if a committee of this House debated this and looked into this before we passed a bill like this on the floor?
I would, we did have some meetings in committee, specifically with House Bill 147 that I was the sponsor for. We did have some debate in subcommittee there. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the will and ask for your favorable consideration.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 68, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Ridley rise?
Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that this bill was signed to my subcommittee? We did not hear the bill, and actually some of the signers on the bill were going to vote against their own bill. Is that not true, sir?
I wish I had known that. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 31, the nays are 129. This House has disagreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 68. Disagreed. Okay. Chair recognizes Chairman Rich for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 94.
Chairman Rich has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 94. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 94 by Representative Rich, the 97th and others to be entitled Act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 8 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to theft so as to provide for the crime of theft by possession of stolen mail.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rich to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the mail theft and porch piracy bill.
Lady will suspend. We've got a little loud volume in here, so let's kind of tone it down a little bit. Lady may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring to you the Senate substitute to House Bill 94, which is the mail theft and porch piracy bill. The Senate Judiciary Committee made some amendments that are very good and I think address some of the concerns that some of the members of our body had. They added clarifying language that it will be within the discretion of the trial judge in order to charge a felony or a misdemeanor. And in addition, for the porch piracy, they added a requirement that there be 3 or more packages having been taken from 3 or more addresses, thus better ensuring that we are actually targeting true crime rings and porch pirates. I will yield for any questions.
You do have a couple of questions if you care to yield.
Yes, I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Walensky, in room 341 for a question.
Thank you, Speaker. Does the gentlelady yield?
I do.
What LC number has that last part you just said about the 3?
413169S, and it appears on lines 39 through 42.
Okay. I apologize. I got out of our folder LC 289958. Would that LC be?
No, I think that if you look back one more, there will be the
There it
substitute
is.
behind it.
Okay, tell me the line one more time, please. Sorry.
Lines 39 through 42.
Thank you so much, Chairman.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin in the gallery to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes.
Appreciate your explanation of the changes. Is it not true that the porch piracy crime, which as you explained could be a felony or a misdemeanor, it still does not have any sort of provision that is sensitive to the value of the items? Is that correct?
No, absolutely not. There is actually no need for that. If that were in here, then there would be no change to the current law.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that confirm that. Okay, thanks so much.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 94, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the lady's motion. The ayes are 103, the nays are 59, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 94. House will be in recess until 3:50.
Clerk will ring the bell. The chair recognizes Representative Lumsden for a motion.
Madam Speaker, I move that this House agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 98.
Representative Lumsden moves that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 98. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 98 by Representative Lumpson, the 12th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia and Teddy relating to state government, so to provide conditions for meeting and public hearings to be held by teleconference in emergency conditions.
The chair recognizes Representative Lumsden to explain the Senate substitute.
Senate substitute to House Bill 98. This is a bill that we passed February the 22nd, 162-0. This is the bill that provides local governments the ability to hold meetings and conduct business during emergency situations. The only change that was made was some language that the governor had requested, which more clearly defined the difference between local governments and state agencies. That's all the change involved. And I would be glad to answer any questions, and I'd appreciate your favorable consideration.
There are no questions. The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 98, all those in favor will vote yes, all those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 151, the nays are 1, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute, House Bill 98. The chair recognizes Representative Gaines to make a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 141.
Representative Gaines moves that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 141. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 141 by Representative Gaines, the 117th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 15 and Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia and Teddy relating to victim compensation, so as to provide for requirements for awards made from the Georgia Crime Victims Emergency Fund.
The chair recognizes Representative Gaines to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This one's easy because they didn't change anything. They made a change in committee that got stripped back out, and Rules Committee says the exact same bill that we passed unanimously earlier this session, 167-0. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You have a question?
Okay.
The chair recognizes Representative Cannon for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
I will.
Can you explain then why we are agreeing to this if you said that there's no changes?
So in Senate committee, they did make changes, but then in Rules Committee, they stripped those changes back out of the bill, so it's the exact same language that this House has already passed.
There are no more questions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 141, all those in favor will vote yes, all those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 158, the nays are 0, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 141. The chair recognizes Representative Wiedauer for a motion.
I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 153.
Representative Wiedauer has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 153. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 153 by Representative Wiedauer, the 119th and others to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 Title 10. The official code of Georgia and Taylor relating to Fair Business Practices Act of 1975 so as to provide for requirements for the solicitation of services for corporate filings.
The chair recognizes Representative Wiedauer to explain the motion.
Thank you. Colleagues, this is a simple change. They tweaked line 14. This is the Consumer Protection Bill on soliciting corporate registrations with the Secretary of State. It just expands it basically to include email possibilities as well as mail. That's it, and I will yield for any questions.
You have a question. The chair recognizes Representative Walensky for a question.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Can you please let us know, describe what Helvetica font is and what other fonts you considered in terms of what was going to be used here and why you chose Helvetica?
Well, I'm just fond of it. It's pleasing to the eye, and I appreciate the question. I will yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 153, all those in favor will vote yes, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 158, the nays are 2, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 153. The chair recognizes Representative Reeves for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 154.
Representative Reeves has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 153. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 154 by Representative Reeves, the 34th and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 19, the official code of Georgia and Taylor relating to domestic relations so as to strengthen, clarify, and update provisions relating to the protection of children.
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I said this is a Senate substitute, but this is actually, we made an amendment to this bill in the Senate, which the Senate received, and what we did is we tacked on to the very end of this a measure, a defects measure that had gotten lost before crossover day that simply allows 6 months before a child who is in the custody of defects, 6 months before their 18th birthday, it allows defects to petition for that child to have a guardian if need be. I've run across this in my private practice before, especially with children who are disabled. The way the law currently is that you have to wait until their 18th birthday to petition for that guardianship, and it creates a gap while that's pending. And by allowing this 6 month for defects for foster children, it will allow the same rights for them so that a guardian can be in place the day that they turn 18. It becomes effective and they don't have that gap. So this is added on to the adoption revision bill that we had done earlier this year, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
There is a question. The chair recognizes Representative Clark in the gallery for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
I am behind the podium, so you cannot see me.
Okay.
But
I'm looking for
I
you.
am here. My question is, how long does this process normally take? You said this would give it 6 months. Generally speaking, how long does it take right now?
It certainly doesn't take 6 months. It really depends on, there are some timelines that the probate court is held to once a petition is filed, but there are a lot of things that have to happen guardian ad litems are appointed, they have to get reports back to the court, and the court has, it's a very rigorous decision deciding to give an adult a guardian. It's typically in the situation where there's a disability or incapacitation of the person who is about to be of the adult age. And so, but I do these routinely in my law practice, and I certainly don't foresee that if a judge knows that a minor is turning 18, then they will prioritize it, and it will certainly be done in 6 months.
Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
are no more questions.
Thank you. Before I yield the well, Madam Speaker, I just want to take a moment of personal privilege. We're here on this adoption bill. This really, it marks 5 years of work on adoption and foster care, and there's been a dedication, and I just want to say that it started from this house, and that's something that I'm really, really proud of. This effort has always been about families. It's been about growing families. It's been about finding loving homes of all kinds for all children. It's been about taking care of our foster children and trying to bring healing to a place where something has been broken. And I've had a lot of opportunity to talk about my perspective this session and with my family and my son, and I know I'm so appreciative of your prayers and the support that I've received. But the perspective really for me this session has been is that nothing is more important than family. And serving in this body is a true privilege, and I know that we share a bond that is much like family. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to this house for the work, for standing by the work that we have done. And I also want to say a special thank you to Speaker Ralston for all of his support in all of these efforts with adoption and foster care. And Madam Speaker, I yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute House Bill 154, all those in favor will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 163, the nays are 0, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 154. The chair recognizes Representative Corbett for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I make a motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute of House Bill 207.
The Representative Corbett has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 207. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 207 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others to be titled an act to amend Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic so as to provide for electronic submission of certain documentation required of manufacturers, distributors, and dealers.
Chair recognizes Representative Corbett to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The only change in this bill is in Section 2, line 37. The language is added that the secondary metal recycler, used motor vehicle parts dealer, or a scrap metal processor would be included in the ones that could file documents electronically. That's all the bill does, and I'll stand for any questions.
There are no questions.
Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute House Bill 207, all those in favor will vote yes, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 166, the nays are 0, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute House Bill 207. The chair recognizes Representative Gaines for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 286.
Representative Gaines has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 286. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 286 by Representative Gaines, the 117th, and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia and Territory relating to county police so as to restrict the ability of county governing authorities to reduce funding for county police departments.
The chair recognizes Representative Houston to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 286, which we discussed quite a bit in this chamber, the Senate made some adjustments that we all worked together on in connection with the Georgia Municipal Association to address some of their concerns, and be happy to walk through some of those specifics. Mostly minor changes, including adding public safety facility as an exception in their spending. To come up with some language that again cities asked for. I know we've already talked about this bill at length, but I think, especially right now over the last few weeks since we passed this bill, we've seen Portland and Los Angeles have also gone back on their work to try to defund the police as crime has skyrocketed in those cities. So I think it's absolutely critical that we get this legislation done to continue to protect families in this state. Madam Speaker, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
The chair recognizes Representative Thomas for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
Does this legislation, is it not true that this legislation prohibits local governments from reducing the police force budget by more than 5% annually or in a rolling 10-year period unless the county actually or anticipated revenue decreases by more than 5%?
Annually and over 5 years.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
Is it not true that local counties and police departments, it's vital that they have the needed resources for their law enforcement so that training programs like de-escalation programs, how to deal with the public programs are funded properly so that the engagement is done in a proper manner?
Absolutely. I think that's why we need to invest more in training, increase pay of law enforcement officers. So absolutely.
Thank you for the gentleman.
Do you yield?
I'll yield for one more question.
The chair recognizes Representative Clark for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
I'm behind the column. Can you address the issue that if this bill is to pass, that some counties and municipalities may be afraid to increase their police budgets because they can't go back if they need to make adjustments later?
Well, again, what we've done in this legislation is if there's a responsible need to reduce spending, that there's ability to do so, and including like the changes we worked on in the Senate where if they want to invest in a public safety facility or if they want to have large time capital improvement projects like buying police cars, then they can do that and it won't affect them the following year. So we've tried to make sure that if there's a responsible reason to reduce spending, they can do so, but we're not going to allow counties and cities to just slash their police departments and put families at risk. Madam Speaker, I'll yield the well and ask for the body's favorable consideration.
The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 286, all those in favor will vote yes, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. For what purpose does Representative Anulowicz rise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it not true that no matter how we vote on this bill today, the fact remains that everyone wants to live in a safe community? Everyone wants to live in a safe community, and these local governments know best how to keep their communities safe?
That's a question for each and every member to make. For what purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
Parliamentary Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that, to Representative Anulowicz's point, what we'd like to do as a body, if it were possible, is have a more comprehensive discussion about public safety that includes a thoughtful analysis of root causes, funding for diverse target areas such as mental health and other social priorities, and not just limit our review of these issues to a handful of bills that accomplish political messaging at the expense of more comprehensive strategy.
That sounds like what the member believes. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 100, the nays are 73, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 286. The chair recognizes Representative Reeves for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House agree to House Bill 479 as amended by the Senate.
Representative Reeves moves that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 479. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 479 by Representative Reeves, the 34th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 17, Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to criminal procedure so as to revise certain arrest powers.
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the Citizens Arrest Repeal Bill, and the bill was, I guarded the words of this bill like I've perhaps never guarded anything in my career here. And the Senate Judiciary Committee did not amend the bill. The bill was amended as it went to the Senate floor. And I want to make clear, and I know I've spoken with amendment. What the bill does is it creates, as we've created a similar category for restaurant owners and retailers, a right of detention that has parameters around it. It creates a third category that would apply to businesses that have property, that are doing business on their property or somebody else's property. For example, if you're a lawn maintenance company and you have a bunch of equipment on a trailer that's parked in a cul-de-sac and someone were to steal a lawnmower, you would have the same ability to detain someone that you would if you were a loss prevention officer at Target or Walmart, etc. I think this is good because it creates clarity. Arguably, that right exists under 16-3-24, but this is actually an improvement on it because it takes, we have created structure around what this detention looks like. There are rules. You have to have probable cause. You have to, it has to be reasonable. You have to call the police at a reasonable time or release that person. And the continuum of force is discussed in this new law we've created. So this actually puts certainty around this additional concept and doesn't leave it to chance or to guess. And so I would ask everybody, I think that this is an improvement to this bill, and I hope that everybody will join me again in supporting of this bill. And Madam Speaker, I will yield for any questions.
You have a question. The chair recognizes Representative Cannon for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
I do.
Can you speak a little bit more about this provision on the continuum of force that you just spoke about?
Yes, well, the continuum of force is something that is defined in our self-defense statutes with the type of force that is allowed to be presented in certain situations. And the force, if you are defending yourself, the force that you, if you're legally defending yourself, the force that you give is oftentimes proportionate to the threat of the force that you are receiving. And so in House Bill 479, as it relates to the detention rights that have been created for these categories, it makes clear that deadly force is not a force that can be used in these matters of defending property. Deadly force is only permissible to be used if you are defending yourself or somebody else against a forcible felony or the threat of substantial bodily injury or death.
Chair recognizes Representative Gilliard for a question in the gallery.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Isn't it true that in 1863, when this law, outdated and antiquated, was created, it was created also on the backs of Thomas R. Cobb, who was an avid racist, who wrote the doctrine on how to form the Ku Klux Klan and legally lynch black folk?
That is true.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I do.
True that Georgia would be the first state in the nation to repeal this law, and that Senator Michael Janarius in New York and Representative Wendell Gilliard in South Carolina have taken the leads to follow us.
That is absolutely true, and it's
Does the
something that
gentleman
makes me very proud.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I do.
If we pass this law today, Georgia must hold their truths to be self-evident on paper and on law to truly be the state that's too busy to hate. Is that true?
It's true.
Thank you for this great bill. I support it
Thank you
and
for
hope
your
that we'll move forward.
Thank you for your support, Representative Gilliard, and your friendship and your help on this.
The chair recognizes Representative Jackson for a question in the gallery.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Can you show me in House Bill 479 the provision that will make sure that citizens understand when they go to apply common sense, that when they see someone that looks like me, that's jogging in the neighborhood, that they will not take it upon themselves to exercise citizens' arrest that may end up being a fatality?
Representative Jackson, the bill repeals the concept of citizen's arrest. It would no longer be legal for anyone to engage in a citizen's arrest. And if they engaged in an illegal detention, a detention that is not otherwise authorized by other areas of law, which is always bound and limited to the concepts of reasonableness, if they were to engage in such behavior without having the justification of doing so, then they would be arguably committing a crime, or they would be committing something where you would have a private cause of action to pursue against them.
Does the gentleman further yield?
I do.
Because of the climate that we are in Georgia, will a citizen confuse citizen's arrest versus stand your ground law?
Stand your ground law and citizen's arrest are two very different things. They're oftentimes conflated. Citizen's arrest is the action of placing somebody under arrest because you have seen them, you claim to have seen them do something that was against the law, and you have, under the current law, since 1863, you have the right to affirmatively make an arrest of that person. Stand your ground, 16-3-23.1, is a matter of self-defense. It's derived from our ability to defend ourselves and the duty to retreat. So they're very different concepts, are oftentimes conflated. I think that everything that we can do as a culture and society, as a General Assembly, and in our communities back home to educate our residents, our constituents, and our citizens on what proper self-defense is and what it is not, makes make all of our communities better places and makes Georgia a better place. And I hope that the attention that what Georgia's gone through in the last year, what every single one of our residents have experienced, and the effort in doing what we're doing here, I hope that this is a step in creating that education and awareness about defending oneself and the appropriateness of that depending on the circumstances.
Does the gentleman yield for one further question?
I'm gonna yield for one more question.
Thank you. And I appreciate the gentleman's explanation. Would it be to our body that the explanation that you just gave, that we should also ensure that we provide that same level of education to all Georgians, urban, rural, and suburban, to make sure that they have the same level of understanding that you just described to all of us in this chamber?
I support what you're saying. Members of the General Assembly, House of Representatives, thank you, and I yield the well.
The gentleman has, on the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 479, all those in favor will vote yes, all those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 169, the nays are 0. The House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 479. The chair recognizes Representative Levitt for a motion. Leverett.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 635.
Representative Leverett has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 635. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 635 by Representative Leverett of the 33rd and others to be titled an act to amend Title 15, the official code of Georgia Annotated relating to courts, so as to provide that each judge of the Superior Court, State Court, and Probate Court, and each magistrate shall have the authority to perform any lawful judicial act regardless of where he or she is physically located.
The chair recognizes Representative Leverett to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, taking a bill for the first time over to the Senate reminded me of Winston Churchill's comment that there's nothing more exhilarating than being shot at without effect. But seriously, I believe the Senate made some good changes to this bill. As you recall, this was a bill that had some of the Judicial COVID-19 task force provisions and initiatives that would allow us to deal with the backlog that's been accumulating during the COVID-19 pandemic. One provision allowed judges, it was requested by the Superior Court judges, that would allow them to remotely sign orders. They can already do this, but this would provide they could do that even if they were outside the limits of the state. Another provision modified some of the existing law on moving a location of a courthouse. We got over to the Senate and they added what were basically Representative Gunner's bills, 555 and 556, that allowed, one allowed DAs to file accusations on felony cases until June 30 of next year, which would expedite the processing of those cases. And the other bill would allow defendants to request bench trials, that is, trials before a judge. Those two latter provisions have a sunset on them, and the Senate version retained the McLaurin Amendment, which would have carved out from those provisions serious violent felonies, the so-called 7 deadly sins. So the changes were all welcome, and we would ask your favorable approval of this today, and I'll yield the well for any questions.
The chair recognizes Representative Walensky for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Is it not true that my bill is also in this bill?
Well, that's true, and that's the reason I asked you if I can name it the Mike Walensky Happiness Adjustment and Health Act, or MWAHA, but you refuse. So.
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
I think we all agree that's a terrible name, and it's understandable, but I was going to say that Judge Gunter sits next to me and you're in front of me, so is it not true that 341 is a powerful room and this bill says so?
The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin for a question in the gallery.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Is it not true that despite that Representative Walensky was involved in this process, that the Judicial Council has requested these bills because they're a very important tool for moving cases along as quickly as possible?
The gentleman speaks the truth.
Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, I yield the well and ask your favorable consideration.
The gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 635, all those in favor will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. For what purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I have a concern as to the germaneness of the opening remark about being shot at after we had just passed a bill about citizens' arrest where someone was actually shot fatally?
As described in our rule book, only pertains to two different sections contained within a bill that are unrelated.
Further
Have
inquiry?
all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes were 165, the nays were 1, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 635.
Chair recognizes Representative Rick Williams, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Come before you and make a motion that the House accept the amendment to House Bill 128.
Representative Williams has moved that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 128. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 128 by Representative Williams, the 145th and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 1 and Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to general provisions regarding health so as to prohibit providers from discriminating against potential organ transplant recipients.
Chair recognizes Representative Williams to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask your consideration to accept this amendment and pass this bill. It passed unanimous in the House, passed unanimous in the Senate. They added on Simon's Law, which protects also the right to resuscitate a child. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them, or I'll yield the way.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 128, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 163, the nays are 1, and this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 128. Chair recognizes Chairman Rich for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 287.
Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 287 by Representative Rich, the 97th and others to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 entitled 20, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to competencies and core curriculum, so as to include tobacco and vape instruction regarding school alcohol and drugs.
The chair recognizes Chairman Rich to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate added on to this bill a provision that will require the public schools, grades 6 through 12, to include in their health and physical education training or education on human trafficking awareness. I will yield for any questions.
You have no questions?
Thank you, and I request your favorable consideration.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 287, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 163, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 287. Chair recognizes Representative Meeks for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282.
Representative Meeks has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 282 by Representative Meeks, the 178th and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 13, Chapter 5 of Title 48, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to ad valorem taxation of qualified timberland property.
Chair recognizes Representative Meeks to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we passed this bill earlier. We got to the Senate, we made a couple of changes. We changed the evaluation to a 50-50 instead of a 65-35, and also added a couple of other documents that would be approved for describing the particular property that's being enrolled in the program. And Mr. Speaker, that is the changes to the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You do
I
have
yield
a
the well.
question.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Barr to your left for a question.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I haven't been able to look at this in detail. Which way did we move the now you said it's a 50-50? Which way did we go on the?
It was 35-65, and we went to 50-50.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. If no other questions, Mr. Speaker, I
You
yield the
do
well.
have one more question if you care to yield.
One more, yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Question about line 95 and 96 in the amendment. I'd like to ask about the simple forest management plan.
Sure.
Can you help to just explain to the body a little bit more about that and why they shall not be required to submit that?
We worked through an agreement with the Department of Revenue that would actually go out and check the pieces of property and make sure that they are indeed being used for the purposes which they are enrolled in the program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 166, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282. Chair recognizes Chairman Ballinger for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House accept the Senate substitute to House Bill 273.
Chairman Ballinger has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute, House Bill 273. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 273 by Representative Ballinger, the 23rd to be entitled Act to amend Article 3, Chapter 4, Title 3 of the Official Code of Georgia and Territory relating to local authorization and regulations for manufacture, distribution, and package sales of distilled spirits.
Chair recognizes Chairman Ballinger to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not yet, Dean. We've got at least one more. House Bill 273 just basically sets liquor free. We've had this set beer free. This sets liquor free. It allows for direct sales from distilleries to public. It sets limitations, daily limits, and on-site production requirements. It allows a distillery to make retail sales through its tasting rooms, investment in manufacturing, job creation, and promotion of homegrown products here in the state of Georgia. That's what this bill does in a nutshell. And Mr. Speaker, out of respect for everybody's time, I will yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 273, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the lady's motion. The ayes are 127, the nays are 33, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 273. Chair recognizes Representative Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I insist on the House position for SB 195.
Representative Gravely has moved that the House insist on its position on House Bill 195. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 195 by Senator Wallace, the 53rd to be entitled Act to amend Code Section 223.3 of the Official Code of Georgia and Territory relating definitions regarding hemp farming.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely to explain his motion.
Ladies and gentlemen of this House, I believe we've got an opportunity to go into conference and to insist. We had some good things in this bill. For 7 years, the House has led. We've always ended up at a conference, but we need to do it again so that we can keep this going forward. This is a good opportunity for us, and the Senate just defeated 2 amendments to try and kill the bill. So we need to insist on our position and move into a conference committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gravely has moved that the House insist on its position on Senate Bill 195. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and the House has insisted on its position on Senate Bill 195. Chair recognizes Chairman Lumsden for a motion.
I move that this House agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 254.
Chairman Lumsden has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 254. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 254 by Representative Lumsden, the 12th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 23, Title 33, the official code of Georgia entitled relating to licensing of agents, agencies, sub-agents, counselors, and adjusters, so as to increase the insurance commissioner's enforcement authority.
Chair recognizes Chairman Lumsden to explain the Senate substitute.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 254 is a department bill, came as a priority request from the Insurance Commissioner's Office. We passed this bill 163 on February the 16th. It is the bill that addresses the laws that govern the operation of public adjusters in our state. The changes made in the Senate were really just clarifications, minor language change. Line 210 gives the commissioner discretion to require a public adjuster to provide proof of financial responsibility as a condition of licensure. Lines 247 corrects a drafting error. Line 282 updates allowed hours for solicitation. 291 and 293 clean up language clarifying employees must have a public adjuster's license to act as a public adjuster. And lines 334 through 338 adds language clarifying what a contractor is allowed to discuss with a property owner. Those were the only changes. These were changes that the industry had requested and the Insurance Commissioner's Office was agreeable to, and that is the bill. Be glad to answer any questions. If not, I'll yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 254, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 164, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute on House Bill 254. Okay, the chair is advised that the budget is on the tables in the back. So, and that will be out back of the chamber, out back of the gallery, and out back at 341. The rules of the House require that the budget lay on the desk for 1 hour before it's considered by the House. That 1 hour begins at 4:55 p.m., March 31, 2021. Chair recognizes Representative LaHood for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House agree to the Senate sub to House Bill 245.
Representative LaHood has moved that this House agree with the Senate substitute to House Bill 245. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 245 by Representative LaHood of the 175th and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 35 of Title 43 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to podiatry practice so as to amend a provision relating to fingerprint and criminal background checks.
Chair recognizes Representative LaHood to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate sub to House Bill 245 makes a very minor change, and it's on line 16 and line 30, where the phrase "or its representative," those three words were struck, and that was to satisfy an FBI recommendation to make sure it was not difficult to match our Medical Practice Act when doing compacts with other states. It's a very simple change, and I would appreciate your favorable consideration. I yield the well. Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 245, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 169, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 245. Chair recognizes Representative Gaines for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 231.
Representative Gaines has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 231. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 231 by Representative Gaines, the 117th and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 5 of Title 16 and Article 1 of Chapter 13 and Title 19 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to stalking and granting of relief by superior courts.
Chair recognizes Representative Gaines to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 231, which we passed unanimously earlier this session, is a positive step forward in our fight against domestic violence. Mostly just cleanup language. The only substantive change would allow individuals who have been in a dating relationship within the last 6 months to also seek these TPOs. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I'll yield for one.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
I will.
I have a question about lines 26 through 29 as it details the definition of a dating relationship. With today being Transgender Day of Visibility, many times those in the transgender community experience dating violence, and actually we have a lot of violence that ends up in their death. Would this bill actually be supportive of the transgender and LGBTQ community?
This legislation applies, to make sure that anybody in a dating relationship that has violence against them, they have the opportunity to seek civil relief to make sure that they are protected. And so that's what this legislation does. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well and ask for the body's favorable consideration.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 231, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 169, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 231. Chair recognizes Chairman Chokus for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate sub for House Bill 208.
Chairman Chokus has moved that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 208. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 208 by Representative Chokus, the 138th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4, Title 1 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating holidays and observances so as to provide that the second Wednesday of February of each year shall be designated as National Swearing-In Day in Georgia.
Chair recognizes Chairman Chokus to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a simple amendment. In the list of armed forces that would be recognized, it included the Senate, through a floor amendment, added Merchant Marine. They just added Merchant Marine to the list. And without, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 208, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. We're back to 128. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 172, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 208. Chair recognizes Representative Rick Williams for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the House be in agreement to House Bill 124 as amended by the Senate.
Representative Williams has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 124. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 124 by Representative Williams, the 145th, to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 18 entitled 43, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to funeral directors and establishments, embalmers and crematories, so as to provide for multiple cremation devices.
Chair recognizes Representative Williams to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. All this is the same cremation bill that we passed unanimous out of here just a few weeks ago. Ask for your favorable consideration. I'll yield the well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 124, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 170, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 124. Chair recognizes Representative Rick Williams for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bring before you House Bill 354 as amended by the Senate. Make a motion we approve the amendment.
Representative Williams has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 354. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 354 by Representative Williams, the 145th and others to be titled an act to amend Title 43, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to professions and businesses, so as to require the State Board of Cemeterians and the State Board of Funeral Service to report suspected unlawful activity to the Sheriff's Office and the Attorney General.
Chair recognizes Representative Williams to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the bill that passed out of here unanimous and passed out of the Senate unanimous. The only change they made was giving the state boards time to notify the State Board of Funeral Service and the State Board of Cemeterians. And so, therefore, I ask for your favorable consideration and I yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 354, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 168. The nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 354. Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate's amendment to House Bill 307.
Chairman Cooper has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 307 by Representative Cooper, the 43rd, and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 24, Title 33, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to insurance generally, so as to revise the Georgia Telehealth Act.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the telehealth bill, and the Senate caught something that we didn't put in. In this day and age, when in rural areas we have fewer and fewer specialists, we are getting family practitioners, And very often they need to consult with a specialist hundreds of miles away, and this allows for them to do that and to exchange, like MRI reports and so forth, without the patient having to be actually present for a visit. And it sets the stage for them to be also paid for that visit. That's what the Senate did, and I would ask the House to approve these changes to 307. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield.
On the lady's motion that this House agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the lady's motion. The ayes are 168, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307. Chair recognizes Chairman Corbett for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute of House Bill 336.
Chairman Corbett has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 336. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 336 by Representative Corbett of the 174th, being titled an act to amend Chapter 23 of Title II of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to hemp farming so as to provide for compliance with federal laws and regulations.
Chair recognizes Chairman Corbett to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Ag Committee in the House, it became apparent that the surety bond was too low, talking to the farmers, and also the process on how to file a claim against that bond. So in Section 5 of the bill, working with the Department of Ag, and they followed legislation or wording from Colorado, exactly how they determine that. We had raised it already to $300,000, but this new language here basically sets a process that is 2% of last year's hemp bought from that the processor buys from a licensee with a minimum of $300,000, a maximum of $1 million, and then also a process on how to file the claim if they need to with the Department of Ag, and that's all we're doing in Section 5. And I ask for everybody's favorable consideration, and I yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 336, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 159, the nays are 5, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 336. Chair recognizes Representative LaRicchia for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Asking this House to agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 346.
Representative LaRicchia has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 346. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 346 by Representative LaRicchia of the 169th, being titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 11 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to emergency medical services personnel.
Chair recognizes Representative LaRicchia to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is Jerem's Act allowing paramedics to administer shots for those in adrenal crisis. This bill is largely unchanged. If you'll look at line 22, they added or any adrenal insufficiency. Line 23 is believed to be in crisis. That's all they did, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you. I yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 346, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 169, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 346. Chair recognizes Representative LaHood for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 363.
Representative LaHood has moved that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 363. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 363 by Representative LaHood of the 175th and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to crimes and offenses so as to revise definitions relative to the protection of elder persons.
Chair recognizes Representative LaHood to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Senate amendment adds some language to Section 6 of House Bill 363, and this is to the intention of that is to close a loophole that currently exists based on a Court of Appeals decision in a case called Bully versus State, where a criminal defendant used his position as an owner of a rehab facility to prey and sexually abuse women. It's a good bill. It's tough on crime, and if there's no questions, I'll yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 363, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 164, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 363. Chair recognizes the Speaker Pro Tem of the House for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 370.
Speaker Pro Tem Jones has moved that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 370. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 370 by Representative Jones of the 47th and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 7 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to county and municipal hospital authorities so as to provide for term limits for members of joint hospital authorities.
Chair recognizes Speaker Pro Tem Jones to explain her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill revises the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority, and it'll result in about $1.5 million more going back to the hospital to pay towards pension obligations and indigent care on the term limits which are being put in place that are very similar to the term limits on the Grady Memorial Corporation. Senator Lester Jackson had an amendment in the Senate which I think improved the bill. It eliminates any partial terms as counting towards the term limit. The bill passed in the Senate 46-2, and with that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for your favorable consideration. I yield the well.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 370, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 98, the nays are 67, and this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 370. Chair recognizes Chairman Lumsden for a motion.
I move that this House agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 451.
Chairman Lumsden has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 451. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 451 by Representative Lumsden, the 12th and others to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to property tax exemptions so as to provide for the optional determination by a taxpayer of the fair market value.
Chair recognizes Chairman Lumsden to explain the Senate substitute.
House Bill 451 was a bill that we passed on March 5th, 159-0. It was a bill that came as a request from the Georgia Manufacturers Association, simply provided an optional way to determine applicable fair market value on finished inventory for the year 2021. This was a COVID-caused problem. The only change was a correction in a code section, a Scrivener's error. I appreciate your favorable consideration.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 451, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 167, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 451. Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 458.
Chairman Cooper has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 458. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 458 by Representative Cooper, the 43rd, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 34, Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to physicians, physicians' assistants, and others so as to require certain training relating to sexual misconduct for members of the Georgia Composite Medical Board.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the clerk explained, this is about the sexual misconduct and education for physicians. The Senate reduced the requirement for for continuing education to 2 credits. for one time on this issue, and they also put the word actual in the reporting process, that so for a physician must have actual knowledge of the impropriety by another physician when reporting them to the board. I will thank everybody and ask for their favorable consideration of these changes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 458, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. All members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 150, the nays are 15. And this House has agreed to the Senate substitute, House Bill 458. Chair recognizes Representative Gullett for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this House agree to Senate substitute for House Bill 465.
Representative Gullett has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 465. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 465 by Representative Gullett, the 19th and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 60 of Title 36 of the official code of Georgia and Territory relating to general provisions applicable to counties and municipal corporations so as to prohibit local governments from imposing civil penalties upon an alarm systems contractor for a false alarm.
Chair recognizes Representative Gullett to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we carried this over to the Senate, we found out that there's an unintentional issue between landlords and tenants, and the change was at our request to change change individual property owner to alarm user on line 38. Bill does not change the intent of the bill. Ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Do you yield for a question?
No, sir. Thank you.
I guess that answered my question. On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 465, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
Parliamentary Inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the next time that Representative Gullett texts me, I'm just going to say, no, sir?
I think I would agree with that. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 100, the nays are 65, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 465. For what purpose does the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Kelly, rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Senate Bill 156 be recommitted to rules.
The Majority Caucus Whip has moved that Senate Bill 156 be recommitted to the Rules Committee. Is there objection? Clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 156 by Senator Harbin, the 16th, Tippins, the 37th, Lucas, the 26th, Tillery, the 19th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 34 of the official code of Georgia and Territory relating to labor and industrial relations so as to provide for the appointment, oath, bond, powers, duties, and authority of a chief labor officer.
On the gentleman's motion that Senate Bill 156 be recommitted to the Rules Committee, is there objection? Chair hears none, and it is back in the Rules Committee. clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
Honoring the life and memory of Mr. Peter Lamar Stinner. Honoring the life and memory of Dorothy Dot Johnson Fletcher. Honoring the life and memory of Janet Jan Jennings Music. Commending and congratulating Margaret Smith. Recognizing March 25th, 2021 as Greek Bicentennial Independence Day. Recognizing and commending John Keener. Commending Pat Bell and the Jackson County 4-H Club on the occasion of their 48th anniversary. Recognizing June 2021 as Immigrant Heritage Month. Recognizing and commending Dr. Luvina Range. And for other purposes, that completes the reading of the privilege resolution.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. Chair recognizes the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Chairman England, for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to let everyone know that there are tracking documents for the budget out there on the table as well, along with two other sheets or two other packets that I hope you pick up as well. One is from the governor talking about the American Recovery Plan funds and the input he is seeking to get from us going forward on the expenditure of those. And then also a report that Sarah Arroyo in our office did last year as it relates to school system, local school system reserves. That document is out there as well. So as we take a break, you probably want to grab those. It makes it a little bit easier to go through the document on the tracking sheet, figure out what changes were made and where the agreements were. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the chair of the House Rules Committee, Chairman Smith, for an announcement.
Well, where's the standing ovation? Thank you, sir. I'll remember that one. Rules will meet at 6:45. 6:45. Thank you.
Reminder that at the dinner break, please return your tablets to the clerk's office in order that they might be charged. If you have a tablet, get it to a member of the clerk's office staff. Dinner is available in room 216. I understand it is from the varsity. I understand also that you will need a microwave when you pick it up because they brought it a little early. They needed a microwave when they brought it. So we're going to be in recess until 7 p.m. for dinner and a Rules Committee meeting.